TwinGate allows you to keep private resources and internet traffic protected without the hassle of setting up a VPN. You can automate network configuration and deployment with tools like Terraform and Pulumi to quickly and securely connect to Kubernetes clusters, VPCs, and other technical infrastructure. You could try TwinGate for free for up to 5 users or start a 14-day business trial. Visit twingate.com to get started.
Packet pushers.
Hello, welcome to the Network Automation Nerds podcast, where we explore the latest in network automation from a practitioner's perspective. I'm your host, Eric Chou, a network engineer who loves everything about network automation. Today, we have an incredibly special guest who has been a cornerstone in the network engineering community for over 4 decades. Since 2006, or perhaps even earlier, Pepelnjak has been an influential voice and a reservoir of knowledge in network engineering and security through its platform, ipspace.net. With the wealth of content he created, Ivan has helped countless professionals navigate the complexity of network engineering and stay ahead of the curve. Today, we're going to talk about what he has been up to lately, his advice for younger engineers, and his future projects. So without further ado, let's welcome Ivan to the show. Ivan, it's an honor to have you with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
You know, I have to say, I've been practicing pronouncing your name more than once, and I feel like I still messed up. So let's set the record straight.
Yeah, well, first name is great. Last name was a bit off.
How do you say it?
Pepelnjak.
Okay, Pepelnjak.
Right.
Twice is the charm. So my apology for mispronouncing your last
No
name
worries.
before.
Every American does, because you guys have different letter to vowel rules than most of Central Europe. So you can't get it right.
Well, I appreciate the understanding, but I aim to get it right from now on.
Don't try to get me pronounce Dutch names or Scandinavian names.
Okay, so we won't force you to pronounce, Guido's, Python's founders, full name or anything like that. We'll stick to our script on network engineering, network automation, and what you've been up to. So for those of you who don't know, I think you announced that you're going to stop creating content actively. You still do, but actively late last year. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that decision? Because I think it's been, like you said, over decades of work. And what led you to that decision?
Well, it's probably been like 18 years or something. Well, I started creating content in early 1990s. I was the guy developing the BGP and OSPF and ISIS and EIGRP and MPLS and QoS courses for Cisco. So people who were going through the early CCNP courses, the service provider version to be precise, those were effectively based on the courses I did for Cisco in Europe in early 1990s. And then I burned out the first time, managed to pull out from the operations because being a technical manager really killed me. The operations part of that was a killer. You can't get the salaries out until you fill in the spreadsheet with all the extra hours people worked. And you have to do that every month by the 5th of the month. Otherwise, the salaries are not paid.
That sounds very stressful.
Yeah, that's a killer. It's just that you have to do this senseless, stupid thing every month or the company doesn't run. And you can't automate it because you actually have to look at the data and say, well, this is reasonable. And yes, this person should be paid as much as they claim they should be paid. And, there's no way you can automate that, even AI, forget it.
Yeah, so is that the same reason that you mentioned that you kind of burned out? Because you went on independently and created ipspace.net, right?
Yeah, and there the idea was that, I don't want to do the same thing like 20 different times. Otherwise, I could just be running, classroom courses and doing consultancy. But after the 5th person asks you how to stretch VLANs between data centers, and you have to persuade them that this is not a good idea, then you go like, maybe I should be doing something else with my life. There's only so many times you can tell people that they should not listen to the vendors and they should not do stupid things. And this is how they should do things. And, then you can't do it anymore. So lately, I've been focusing on creating content. And I had like this unwritten pact with the subscribers that they will get something new every month. And that became a pressure.
Yeah.
So usually, I would be working until late June, and then I would take 2 months off to recharge, and then I would get bored and start working sometimes midsummer, and then start with the regular scheduling in September. Last year, I didn't get bored. So it was like, I'm so burned out that I can't bring myself to think about new content anymore. I have to stop doing that. And so, obviously, trying to be fair, I did things gradually. So, I announced the decision that I will eventually stop as soon as I got to the decision so that, people wouldn't buy the subscription and then expect a year of new content and only get like 4 months or something.
Mm-hmm.
The rules were very clear that I announced that on September 1st, I think. And I said, well, for a year, you will get something for your money. After that, all bets are off. And I managed to create new content till approximately the year end. Now I'm just cheating and don't tell everyone.
No.
So there is a lot of the content that was only available to people who attended individual courses, not the regular subscribers. And that content is really useful, like Ethan Banks talking about his former life when he was working for a payment processor. And he had one of the few really mission critical networks out there. And guess what? They didn't stretch VLANs. And then there were a number of people talking about moving to the cloud. For example, Ed Horley had a great presentation how to move to AWS. So I'm collecting the gems from the last 7 years and editing them first, then making them available to the regular subscribers. So they will get what they paid for.
I was going to ask, so the way that you did it was very responsible and gradual, like you mentioned, right? People who have not encountered your content, they're very high quality. They're not just something that you could go on YouTube and watch somebody who did, like my videos, for example, right? These are kind of impromptu and just, kind of talk. But however, Yvonne's content are curated, really thought out, technically deep dive, validated, and everything that you expect. And therefore, it's a lot of pressure to do that. And I think the way that you did it was to gradually phase out, but you have a perpetual membership for people who already purchased them. And that's what you're talking about, right? So people cannot sign on at this point, but people who have signed on before are still getting these content. It's just not on the regular cadence of once a month.
Yeah, as I announced that, because a lot of people were renewing subscribers, obviously the revenues went down.
Mm-hmm.
And then around year end, I got to a point where it was like, well, I don't think this still makes sense because, if the revenue is coming in, then my accountant is happy because he's charging me for more work. And every now and then you have to deal with someone who experiences a problem with a credit card or something. And every second blue moon, you have to deal with a patient who has unreasonable expectations. And I don't want to go into those stories.
Yeah.
We need a few beers before that. So I got to the point where I said, well, running the commercial activity doesn't make any sense anymore because the revenue is just going down and I can see the trend and I want to stop before I hit zero. On the other hand, hosting the server that authenticates users, it's an EC2 instance and I use long-term instances. So it's, I don't know, maybe $20 a month.
Right.
I moved all the content from AWS S3 to Cloudflare.
Okay.
So no egress fees anymore.
God bless Cloudflare for doing.
God bless
everybody.
Cloudflare. I love them. So my bill fell down to 87 cents a month.
Oh my Lord. Wow. That's a big
how
difference.
much I am paying Cloudflare to host all my content per month. And all the streaming, all the subscribers are doing is for free at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Cloudflare, if you're listening, thanks a million. Please keep it this way.
Yeah. Besides all the DDoS, and I think they recently announced that they will stop the crawlers for AI bots, whatever they could identify with, right? So I think they were the first to do that. So they are on top of it, obviously all the free DDoS stuff. So I think they're doing great service for people and for content creators. That's something I did not think about. But now that you mentioned it, yeah, of course, right? Like you should be able to, cut your charges dramatically by moving.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I'm paying them $5 a month for some Argo Plus stuff. So I have a subscription for $5 a month. And on top of that, I have 87 cents for the storage.
Yeah.
And you guys can all enjoy the content indefinitely as long as my credit card works.
And I think you actually gradually release content that were previously behind a paywall, but now,
Yes.
yeah. So you want to give some thoughts on that?
A lot of the old stuff is still very valuable because technology doesn't change that much.
Right.
And, I have to be fair to the subscribers. They were paying for something. Making that free 6 months after they paid would probably upset a few people.
I think that's fair. I mean, as long as you're transparent and upfront about it, right?
Yeah, but, releasing 10-year-old how to configure IPv6 stuff, why not? I mean, that protocol could buy its own beer in US by now.
Exactly, right? Or somewhere in Mexico for sure. And, arguably in some states.
It's over 21 years old.
It's over 21 years old. Got it. Yeah.
So the RFC, I'm not talking about the development.
Sure.
The official IPv6 RFC is of legal drinking age in US.
Nice. And yet we're still talking about migrations and...
Yeah, and we're still, discussing it.
Yeah. But I want to say it's really appreciative, at least from the audience perspective, myself included, because when I was looking for AI content, for AI for networking, there's not that many content out there, especially quality orchestrated stuff. And I came across your content that you recently made free by Javier, and it was excellent. So really appreciate that you actually think about, be fair to the subscribers, as well as making content that are recent and relevant. I mean, obviously the 21-year-old protocol for sure, but also the more recent stuff.
To be precise, his content was always free.
Okay.
That was the deal I had with him because, whenever I had a guest speaker, it was like, if you want to get paid, then it will be behind the paywall. We can't do it other way. If you are willing to do it for free, I will throw in the editing services and everything else. I'll cover those costs and it will be free.
Yeah.
The only change I was able to make after moving to Cloudflare is that now you don't need to register.
Oh, okay.
Because previously, I asked people to create the account so that I would limit my storage fee, egress fees.
Yeah.
And now that there are no egress fees, I really don't care. So now all the videos that were available previously to the free subscribers are now available to anyone without any registration wall or anything, including the full AI content. By the way, Javier has a great book about AI in networking.
Yeah, it's called Machine Learning for Network and Cloud Engineers. It's a kind of dense content for me. So I didn't go through all the examples. I read the book, but a lot of the content were a little bit more involved than just one afternoon sitting and reading it.
You have to dig in, but it's totally worth it.
I think he make a lot of the content and examples in IPython notebook. So you just have to launch it, run each of the cells, and then you should be able to get the results. Plus that he has a self-made tool to generate relevant but fake data for you to analyze. Yeah. So really cool. And I think I've heard about the book, but it wasn't until I watched the content, the webinars that he did on your platform, that I was convinced that this is something that worth spending the time into.
Yeah. And the most important message from, both the webinar and the book is LLM is just a little tiny, irrelevant speck on the AI landscape.
You want to expand on that? Because, I think that's a message worth repeating again.
You know how old I am approximately. I had AI
25.
courses, 25 on top of 30.
Yeah.
Not that bad. It's like, the fresh snow on top of the old snow. Anyway, so in the 1980s, we already had AI lessons at the university.
Mm-hmm.
It's really old stuff, and it's tons of different technologies and tricks and approaches, from, decision trees to fuzzy logic, which is really decision trees with a bit of statistics to it, to neural networks, to clustering technologies. So you try to group things together and then you get a new thing and you try to figure out into which of the groups that you identified it should fit in.
Right.
Which is great if you are, for example, analyzing events in networking.
Right.
Have I seen something similar, something that is in the n-dimensional space close to the current event in the n-dimensional space. But of course, no one is talking about that. Those things have been around for ages, and they are used in production, and they can do really cool stuff. But everyone is talking about the, stupidity of predicting the next word based on the previous, 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Based on all the crap you stole from Reddit and friends. So there we are.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that it's been around for a long time. And I remember machine learning maybe 5 to 6 years ago was about machine learning. And now maybe 2022, 2023-ish, that LLM, the large language module, become kind of the dominant backend for us to leverage AI and so on. So it's been around for a while, but it wasn't, like you said, a
LLM
small
is
set of it.
really just machine learning with, they use different internal architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So, the original machine learning. And now I'm getting to the area where I know just enough to have wrong opinions. So don't quote me on any of this. So originally we had like one layer of neurons, and then maybe we had a few layers of neurons, and then they started experimenting with many layers of neurons. And then they added something called the transformer, and I have no idea what that is. And then someone said, well, what if we apply this to, English text? And so LLMs were born.
Yeah.
Because, all the stuff where they train these models on billions of words for a year and a half, it's really just machine learning applied to a particular domain and on extremely huge data set.
Yeah. And I would highly recommend the content on IP Space, and we'll have the link in the show notes to dive deeper into both, you and Javier's conversation, or mainly Javier's, on his
it's
thoughts.
Javier. I was just asking the questions,
asking the right
the proxy
questions.
for the audience.
There you go. So I would, have those link, and if you're interested in knowing that, and as Ivan mentioned, LLM is part of it, but he also gave a good overview on, AI, neural network, and kind of subcategorized into eventually LLM. So I think you also mentioned this a little bit before, and you've been in the industry for a long time. You wanted to not repeat yourself, like kids, and not repeat yourself on some of the content that you created before, and therefore you start your own business and so on. What I want to double click on is if you have any recommendations for younger engineers who's in the industry today, how should they proceed? Because, I've been doing this for 22 plus years, and I feel the industry is very different from when I first started. When I first started, Cisco was the way to go. You just get certified and learn all the ins and outs for Cisco. Definitely not the case today. So from your perspective, over 4 decades of doing network engineering, 2 decades or so for content creation, what are some of the advices you would give for younger engineers coming into the field today?
Well, first, as you said, it's not just Cisco. And one of the things that I think everyone should master is networking on Linux.
Okay.
Because if you take a look at what operating systems are used out there, it's like 90% Linux.
Okay.
Network devices run on Linux. Android is Linux.
Yep.
All the servers run on Linux. So master that.
Okay.
The other thing, certifications still matter because they are an unfortunate input filter when the HR department gets 1,000 applications for a single job posting. They have to filter that down to maybe 20. So what do? Well, you first specify whatever irrelevant requirements.
Through AI, maybe. Like
whatever.
Yeah.
So you specify some requirements and then just filter on that, because you know that even if you drop 10 really good candidates, you still might have a few in the pile of 50, and you only need one anyway. So who cares?
Right.
So you have to go and do the certification mill just because, otherwise you just can't apply for jobs.
Yeah, it's
Which,
a table
by the
stake.
way, brings me to the recommendation I'm always giving to people. No, don't try to get hired. People should ask you to join them.
Okay.
Which means create visibility, participate in whatever community there is, bring your community of friends, and eventually you will bump into someone who would say, wow, you would be a perfect fit for what we're looking for. I actually know a few people where the company wanted to get them so badly that they created a job for them.
Mm.
Just new job description just to get that guy hired or gal hired.
Yeah.
So that's your ideal position, but you won't get there if you are just, sending job applications through LinkedIn or whatever website is popular these days. So you have to go out there, get known, which means sometimes presenting, which might mean creating content, which might mean sharing with people. By the way, speaking about sharing, another recommendation I was always making is own your content.
Okay.
So don't waste your time collecting loyalty points on vendor forums. Yeah, honestly, what do you get out of that apart from, a dopamine hit?
You get a cookie. You get like a
Yeah.
little ghost star from whichever platform that is.
Yeah, because the guy that you are helping, you probably will never see in your life again.
Right.
You are hidden behind a handle. People don't even know who you are. Oh, it's that great guy on that forum. But
Especially if
will
you're
they,
behind the alias, right?
yeah,
It's like,
exactly. Will they hire you on that? No.
yeah, big brain 123. Oh, I didn't know that was Yvonne or
Yeah,
whoever.
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not my handle, by the way.
Right. Don't steal that handle. And, that's fictitious. And my apology to Big Brain 123 if he's listening, it's purely made up. I grab it out of the thin air. So I want
Dude, you
to,
have a great handle, but let's move on.
yeah, exactly. Just live up to that handle, right? You mentioned Linux, and I definitely agree. So if you were to start today, I think previously they were hidden behind the layers, but now there are a bunch of vendors like Cumulus or even open source project, FLR, and all these softwares and platforms that all run on Linux, or Arista, for example, has a Linux core. So
Nexus OS,
Nexus OS, exactly.
iOS XE,
Right. So
Junos
definitely
now.
Linux. Yeah,
Junos
well, Juno
Evolved is on
BSD,
Linux.
right? Or
Yeah.
oh, okay.
No, it was BSD, but Junos Evolved is on Linux, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Then there's Nokia SR Linux.
Exactly. I was going to mention that as well. So just networking alone, NOS alone, you got a bunch of options and softwares, but also Linux has one on the server front as well. So, if you're hosting it, public facing web app or whatnot, APIs, those are Linux as a base with frameworks on top of it. So definitely agree on that first point on just the Linux. Certification, I think I don't disagree on getting certification as a table stake, but where would you start for somebody? Is it still, like you said, it's not only Cisco, but would you still recommend Cisco as the first path
Of
going
course.
forward?
I mean, we can't give a generic advice because
Sure.
Chinese market is different from US market, is different from Italian market, is different from French market, is different from German market.
Mhm.
Is different from South African or Nigerian or whatever market.
For sure.
So do your homework. Look at the job postings for your country or for the country you want to move to. If you want to move somewhere, figure out what they're asking for. Go for it.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Maybe for the US market, for example, because that's where I'm at, or maybe in the country you're residing in right now, do you think Cisco's still the dominant vendor and that would be a good place to start, or something more neutral like a Network Plus or
I
A
think
plus?
that, let's say, for most of Central European markets,
Sure.
Cisco is still the way to go.
Hmm.
I hate that, but that's the reality.
Well, you're a Cisco Press author for, I don't know, how many years ago was that? Was it 25 years ago?
Yeah, the last book was probably published around 2000. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned it, but yeah, sure. So we'll take that. Cisco, at least for me as well in the US, they're still very dominant and they have the best, I would say, structured learning path and content
Well,
and classes.
they are still the only vendor that understood very early on that training is really marketing.
Yeah, for sure.
You educate people, but you educate them in particular way. And when they move to a different organization, they will bring that mindset with them. And they have some box that they can configure really well. And the next time they do box selection, well, guess what they will do?
Yeah, I haven't been to a company where they say we're a Ubuntu shop or like we're a, a Red Hat Linux shop, but I've been to multiple places where they say we're a Juniper shop, we're a Cisco shop. So
Yeah.
back to your point.
Yeah. And the smaller vendors just don't get it.
Or they don't have the resources yet to get to the train.
I mean, I've been developing training,
Mhm.
so I know how much things cost. And compared to the money they're throwing into their regular marketing, this is peanuts.
Yeah, and I do see a lot of vendors are hopping on that training train and allocate that into marketing dollars. But Cisco has such a huge head start. I would say,
Mhm.
they're still the dominant vendor and everybody's kind of following their footstep as far as the training, the book press, maybe even Cisco Live, right? It is very much a marketing event and seeing the
The
songs of
pure
the
marketing.
praises.
But, it's such a clever marketing event because, of course, it's marketing, but it's not in your face marketing.
That's right. It's big party.
Well, and you get technical value out of it if you are at, like, let's say, a growing part of your career.
Yeah.
I mean, we all got really good technical information from Cisco Live in various stages of our careers. I stopped going there when I figured out that I would go to the 300 level presentation and I would be waiting for the last 5 minutes for the last three important slides, and the presenter would never get there because he would run out of time.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe you just kind of go into the hallway track, right? Start talking to the presenters and all the
That's a
other
different
audiences.
story. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I went to Cisco Live with Networking Field Day a few times.
Yeah.
We just had whatever crappy ticket that didn't give us access to anything apart from the hallways and lunch, but that was great.
Yeah, I think the last time I purchased, so I was at Cisco Live before it was Cisco Live. I think it was called Networker or a Cisco
You're that
Networker.
old?
I am indeed, that old.
Now you just dated yourself. Yes,
Of
it was networkers.
Yeah, it was networkers. And like you said, if I were to go to a Cisco Live right now, for me at least, the hallway track and, like talking to vendors or just have that FaceTime would be more valuable than to sit in the presentation. Not saying they're not valuable at all, but
No,
just
they're
for
great
me.
presentations usually,
Yeah.
and they have pretty strict rules in-house to make sure that the presentations are not engineering puke.
Yeah, we'll give credit where credit's due. I do
Yeah.
like the presentations. I
They
do watch
do a
them.
great job.
Yeah. So the third point that you made about, so first was Linux, second was certification, and third about, I'll paraphrase what you said, you could correct me if I'm wrong, is leave artifacts and build in public or learn in public, build in public.
Yes.
So what you mentioned about owning your own content, helping others, it really resonated with me. But I think what I'm wondering about is which platform do you think is the one to go for, maybe? Do people still read
GitHub
blogs?
pages?
What's that? GitHub pages?
GitHub
Okay.
pages.
That's one. Yeah, sure. We'll
No,
explain, right?
Yeah,
To
it's
elaborate.
amazing how much you can do today with just a simple text editor.
Mhm.
Because, when I started, creating websites was still black magic.
Yeah. You have to host your own server, right? Like back then.
Well, I never was at that point, but I did dabble in HTML and CSS and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I wrote my own Blogger template because I wanted my blog to look this certain way. So that was not fun, I can tell you.
That's not the core competency of why you're writing that blog, right?
But today you have all these content generators that take a bunch of files and generate really good static website out of that.
Mhm.
So personally, I'm using Hugo, but there are like a number of others. The beauty of those generators is that all the major Git repository providers are sort of integrating them.
Yep.
Oh, another recommendation, Master Git.
Okay.
I mean, Git is like Linux. And if you spend some time, figuring out how Git works, you'll be grateful to your younger self when you get older. So you just write something. Yeah, obviously you need the proper metadata. There's so many decent markdown editors on the market, so you don't have to use the VI or Emacs or what have you. You commit it, you push it to the repository, and bam, 3 minutes later, it's on the web, properly formatted with all the cross-references, with a table of content, with category pages, these pages, those pages, yada, yada. So you have a full-blown blog with all the features you ever wanted to have apart from comments, because a static website can't have comments.
Sure.
And it's so trivial, and still people don't do that. I don't get it. It's a bit of a learning curve, yes. But, it's like there's a bit of a learning curve to put together your first IKEA furniture.
Well, I don't know. You should ask my wife because that chair is about to fall down in my living room. I wasn't able to follow the direction.
Yeah, well, like with static websites, the first IKEA furniture you put together will probably fall apart, but
Yeah, by the 10th chair, you want to be
exactly.
sitting on that 10th chair. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, here's a plugin for our friends, Kirk Byers. I mean, he released a course on mastering Git, I think. So what Yvonne talked about on just making changes, commit, push to upstream, those you could do in like a quick start, like 5-minute quick start on Git's website or the tutorial. But if you do want to master it, I mean, and I'm not getting paid commissions or anything. I just feel, Kirk has good contents out there. He's been doing community a lot of good service that you could use Git and then you'll have a fully functional website. So is that what you would recommend is you create a project, maybe check in your code or, make them open source and now Git has, even for private repository, I believe it's free for
Yes.
private repository as well.
Yes.
And then have like maybe a GitHub pages for your static website, not even using Hugo. You just go ahead and publish your markdowns.
Well, obviously you could just publish HTML and serve it through GitHub pages.
Yeah.
But
well,
honestly, that sucks.
Yeah. I've been there as well. I did have to use Bootstrap and, I can have CSS, HTML in order to form my own website. And it came out looking nothing like the professional ones that I expect, but they're just like passable, right? It's not going to win any design.
Yeah, there are. So every one of these tools has tons of different templates and some of them are acceptable. Honestly, you're just going for something that doesn't suck.
Yeah, exactly. Something that it's passable.
It's not GeoCities.
Yeah, I do remember my GeoCity pages with the neon green flashing light on like new blog post. So I get what you're saying about specific tools and there are maybe no code solution, light code solution that you could leverage.
By the way, now that you mentioned Kirk's course,
yeah,
one other thing, don't be afraid of command line.
Okay.
Command line is your friend. So whatever you're doing, try to do it from the command line. It's hard to start with, but once you get proficient, you will be so much faster than people clicking their way around.
And automation, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know what's the beauty of having a blog with 5,000 blog posts in Markdown files and Hugo? I want to change something. I just run sed on it.
Sure.
It's replacing. Yeah, exactly. I was doing a major cleanup when I was getting bored at Seaside because there's nothing to do there. So I finally went to the Cloudflare URL structure where they don't want to have the .html at the end of the URL. But that meant changing all the links in all the blog posts, and I do heavy cross-referencing. Then I said, well, if I'm doing this, I'll do a number of other things. So for example, I will take the host name out of the blog posts that refer to the other blog post because it doesn't make sense to do that. And for various reasons, I will not use the relative URLs. I will use the absolute URLs. So the same content can appear in different pages and still work. Imagine how long it would take me to do that on 5,000 blog posts if I would use GUI.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm imagining you sitting on the beachside. Everybody else is sipping, margaritas, and you're here trying to.
I'm using Git and sed.
Yeah, Git and sed, and so I guess for people who are not familiar with it, I think of sed and awk as being like a ginormous command line based search and replace. Finding patterns and so on. But I just imagine you just typing away and trying to do all of that. So don't be afraid of command line. TwinGate allows companies to keep private resources and internet traffic protected without the hassle of setting up a VPN. With TwinGate, you can automate network configuration and deployment with tools like Terraform and Pulumi to quickly and securely connect to Kubernetes clusters, VPCs, and other technical infrastructure. So say goodbye to open ports with direct, lightning-fast, encrypted, peer-to-peer connections to easily enable secure access to your dev, test, staging, and prod environments with seamless integration to popular identity management tools. You could try TwinGate for free for up to 5 users or start a 14-day business trial. Visit twingate.com to get started. Once again, that's TWINGATE.com to get started.
Yeah, well,
Appreciate that.
I just opened a page in text editor to collect the stuff I'm doing. Every line looked like line noise, but it was like, find all the files that have this pattern and run sed on those files and replace this pattern with this other pattern. Because I'm using Git, I could just run that. I will get like thousands of changes and I would review a few of them to see if I got it right.
Right.
And if I did, cool, I would commit that. Otherwise, I would just revert the changes and I would be back to where I was 5 minutes ago.
Right. So you do version control, right? Git for
Yeah,
version
so
control.
zero
rollback.
risk playing with global find and replace on 5,000 files. How cool is that?
It's very cool. And just to share a little story, Pepelnjak was my first exposure to command line and the power it could be because I was trolling through logs and I wasn't able to find the things that was logged. And it was just like somebody walked by and go, what did you just do in set? And I was like, what is this set thing, right? And it was magic for me. It was definitely resonate with me on the command line. And I also want to point out that for a lot of procedures and cloud provider, for example, AWS, right? You could do things in the GUI and their web interface, but they also have command line option on, AWS CLI, which is often more powerful. And that's true for all the cloud providers, DigitalOcean, Azure, command line. So, definitely give those a shot, like what Yvonne said.
Well, I would be careful with AWS specifically.
Okay, elaborate.
Because, for example, Azure allows you to name objects. And then it's really nice working with them because you can refer to objects using their names and everything works great. Whereas AWS, you always have to refer to any object by ID. And you can use tags as a proxy for names, but that means that whatever you're doing, it's always, oh, gee, I need to find the object ID based on this tag, and then I have the object ID, and then I use the object ID in something else. Also, Azure has this nice add or update mechanism where you say, well, I want to have object with this name and with these attributes, and it figures out what it needs to do.
Okay.
Whereas with AWS, it's always, do I already have an object with this tag? And if I do, then I have to update this object with this ID based on this. Otherwise, I need to create a new object, and then I have to get the object ID, and then I have to apply the tags to the object ID so that I will find it the next time.
Okay.
So if you want to work with AWS with command line, yeah, sure, the basic observability stuff, yeah, just go for it. If you want to modify your AWS setup, either use CloudFormation or Terraform.
That's good advice. I think I know the structure you're talking about because there's always this AWS resource number or something like that.
Yeah.
That's uniquely
ARN,
identified.
Yeah.
A unified identified object. And I'm so used to just having that available. And I think the way that they structure it, for example, Lambda, right? Like there's no IP address, there's no, anything else that you would associate with that's static, but that ARN doesn't really change. But you're right. I think if you get so used to get so locked into one type of thinking or CLI, then you're kind of missing out when you move to other vendors and so on. So definitely the vendor neutral Terraform, like you said, or even, vendor specific CloudFormation that abstract you from that kind of thinking.
Yeah, well, you should use a tool that really uses infrastructure as code principles.
Yeah.
So that you define, no, it's actually intent-based clouding.
Okay. Did you just copyright that?
We have to do that.
Yeah. Intent-based clouding. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because effectively, this is what you do with CloudFormation or Terraform. You specify how you want your environment to look like, and then magic happens.
Agree. And, Terraform, I'm not super familiar with it, but obviously there are a ton of tools out there that does that. But Terraform is definitely one of them that's super popular.
By the way, for people who want to know the difference, when I was doing the cloud webinars, someone working for me created these examples, how to configure simple stuff like a VPC with 2 subnets and 2 virtual machines running in them. And he did that for Azure and AWS, and he did it with Bash scripts. and with Terraform and with the native tools. And it's all in a Git repo.
Okay.
So anyone can just go there and compare the different solutions. And if someone wants to fix our scripts, submit a PR.
That's another point for getting more familiar with Git, right? The collaboration portion, the PR that you mentioned, you do have to do it through Git so that, you can either accept, reject, make comments, or collaborate on top of that. So that brings me to the next subject that I want to discuss, Ivan. So we mentioned what you've been up to, your recommendation for younger engineers. So what are some of your future projects? I do see you're still posting, but I think the last few, you were just referring to other people's blog posts. Is that the direction you're going? Are you still creating some net new content? What are some of your future projects that you know of?
One of the things I realized a few years ago is that I stopped labbing stuff and started talking more about design because labs suck big time. You know how hard it is to build a physical lab, and the virtual labs are no better. So you have this crappy GUI and you're pulling things between different routers. And then eventually you get the carpal tunnel syndrome. And after that, you get the network the way you want to have it. And then you start that thing. And then the
You run out
nightmare
of resources.
starts. Oh, well, yeah, apart from that.
Yeah.
And then you figure out that I have to log into all those devices and I have to configure all the IP addresses and I have to configure OSPF routing and I have to configure BGP neighbors and I have to configure 10 other things.
Right.
And then I can test the one feature I wanted to test and it's like 3 lines and I'll be done in 3 minutes, but I have to do all the other things first.
Right. The silent scream in your mind.
Yes. So years ago, I said, well, I don't want to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And really the breaking point was when Dinesh Dutt told me about Vagrant with libvirt.
Okay.
That's a great solution to spin up virtual machines on Linux under KVM and connect them together. But boy, those config files.
Yeah, it reminds me of Dynamip and Dynagen, by the way.
Dynagen was a beauty compared to this.
Okay.
So I once tried to recreate my DMVPN lab, and it's 6 routers plus the 7th in the middle acting as the internet, although I could just, use a Linux bridge there.
Yeah.
No big deal there. So for those 6 routers to connect them together, manually crafting the config file took me probably a day.
Wow.
Yeah, because I'm not a person who could copy paste the same crap 10 times and get all the parameters right.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's this Jinja 2 thingy that should do that. And that was really the initial idea I had.
Yeah, I may have heard of that, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to do that ever again. I want to have a tool that will take the lab topology, the links and the nodes, and it will spit up the Vagrant file.
Right. So drum rolls. Do you have any solutions that you came up with?
Yeah, well, years ago, I started this project. It's now called netlab.
Yep.
And that was the first step.
Okay.
Once I got, the virtual machines up and running, it's like, now I have to configure IP addresses. I'm dying inside. But hey, I already know all the links and I know all the connections. And if I would have a really smart IPAM, I could just assign all the IP addresses to all the interfaces of all the nodes in my lab. And gee, I wouldn't have to do IP addressing any longer. So that was like the next step. And then it was like, gee, if I'm doing that, I wonder how much more complex it would be to throw OSPF on top of that.
Right.
And of course, it was trivial. And EIGRP was trivial. And ISIS was trivial. And BGP was a little bit more complex because you have to deal with neighbors.
Right.
Then someone came along saying, well, you know what? I want to have this on that particular platform. And I'm like, dude, submit a PR. And a few crazy guys did. So right now, this thing is running on like 20 different platforms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I try to figure them out. It's Aruba, imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Then Cisco ASA, iOS V, iOS XE, iOS XR. Catalyst 8000V as of a few weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
Nexus OS, then it's Arista, Juniper, like 3 or 4 different devices, Dell OS 10, Cumulus Linux 4 and 5, FR routing, Nokia, SR Linux and SROS, BIOS, Fortinet.
Oh, wow. So what you're saying is this netlab project, it's kind of what you're focusing on. And by the way,
Yeah.
I kind of cheated, right? Like I follow you and I saw you were posting about, a bunch of different BGP multi-hub use cases,
Oh,
labbing up with netlabs.
yeah, that's the next project. So,
Okay.
it took us a few years to build this tool to where it is right now. And
Right.
right now, you can configure more or less 90% of things you want to configure on the baseline level.
Hmm.
So we try to stay away from the nerd knobs, particularly the nerd knobs that are vendor specific, because there's no value in that.
Right. Well, some
Oh,
value, but
well,
not
no, the
common
thing
value.
is
Yeah.
fully extensible.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can write your own templates, you can define your own variables, you can define your own data model, you can even define the data model in a way that the tool can validate it.
Hmm.
So it can validate the attribute names, it can validate the values. We really have some sort of a data model schema built in. So you can do that. You can write a plugin that intercepts any step of the data transformation process. So you can implement actually anything you want. It's a bit of work, but for some people it's worth it. So I know that someone did DMVPN with that. Some people did some other crazy stuff with that. So there are people. A few people are doing that, but they are out there. And then I said, well, now that we have this great tool, wouldn't it be great if I could use that tool to recreate what I did in the early 1990s, which was a series of BGP labs.
Hmm.
But now, because I have this tool, that thing was designed in a way that you would use it on physical routers through a 3-day BGP class.
Hmm.
And like any good classroom course, you had to build the configuration continuously for 3 days. And if you messed up on day 1, then you had fun for the other 2 days.
It reminds me of the CCIE lab, right? It's
Yeah,
like kind of built on,
exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
But now, because we have this tool that can spin up the lab and fully configure it in seconds, plus iOS XR boot time, so you can make lunch in between,
Yeah,
we
go ahead.
take 10 seconds and iOS XR takes whatever time it takes. That allows you to, build these fine-grained lab scenarios. Now, I'm joking. This is like you go to a gym and you train one particular muscle in your body. You take the weights and you do just one move to train one muscle, and then you move on and you take different weights and you train different muscles. So you
Right.
can do that with these labs, because right now it's like 50 labs. They cover all the major BGP features and, let's say, approaches. So it's eBGP, it's iBGP, it's a combination of both, it's routing policies, it's all the well-defined attributes, it's load balancing, it's stuff you regularly use like MD5 passwords or other session protection. Then there are a few challenge labs for people who, think they know everything. And well, guys, here is an interesting scenario.
Here's something that only somebody with 40 years of experience could provide you with and challenge your
Well,
brain and
here's
thoughts.
something that will make you think.
Yeah.
So one
Yeah.
of those was like, oh, you have 2 autonomous systems with different AS numbers, and you have to merge them together, and you can only touch the edge routers because these are the only 2 you're allowed to touch because, change control.
Yeah.
And they have to appear as one autonomous system to the outside world because both service providers are doing AS path filtering, and they will not allow you to be transit.
Talk about nerd knobs, right?
Yeah, exactly. It can be done. It's tricky and there are a lot of nuances to get it just right, but it can be done. So yeah, I did the BGP lab so that, people could just master BGP without having to go through these extensive labs where, they throw 15 different tasks at you and then you go like, oh, what am I going to do now?
And you could even run that almost for free or for very little cost in CodeSpace, right? I saw your
It's
post on
free.
that as well.
It's free.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, it's free. But I mean, they still accrue charges and you
No.
set up budgets and so on.
No, that's the beauty of it. GitHub Codespaces has 60 free CPU hours per month.
Right.
which means that if you're using 2-core VM, then you have 33 hours per month.
Mhm.
And honestly, do you have more time than 30 hours to play with BGP?
Yeah, so I get your point. Like realistically, right? Like for all intents and purposes, it's free. No, I get what you're saying. And I love the fact that you're creating these labs and for the audience, they could just run it for free. I also like the comparison that you made. It's like going to the gym and you go straight to that muscle group that you want to work at, right? You can work
Yes.
out in big groups like the basic BGP stuff. It's like working your biceps and triceps. But if you want to focus on that nerd knob that you mentioned, making, I don't know, discontinuate ASM, but still appear as same as outside, it's like going to the gym and work out your neck muscle, right? Like I sure don't have that machine at my garage, but it would be nice to just go in, focus on it, get the knowledge, and get out.
Yes. Well, and you're the first to hear that.
Okay.
So this is, like, don't spread the word.
That's all right. By the time this episode released, probably you'll probably release like a
Yeah,
bunch more labs.
I don't know how fast that will move along, but there are ISIS labs coming.
Nice.
VXLAN, I've been mulling over VXLAN for a long time.
Yeah.
The problem is you can't run it in code spaces because you need a kernel module.
Okay. Got it.
So I have to figure out if maybe Arista can work without the kernel module because they have packet forwarding for non-IP features implemented in user space. It's really fun, you're running Arista containers and MPLS doesn't work. You install the MPLS modules on the host and no, it doesn't work.
And you're wondering whether it's the technology or your setup.
Yeah, well, you get to the I'm too stupid to do that phase. And then you figure out that MPLS doesn't work on the Ethernet interfaces, but it works on VLAN interfaces.
Oh, okay.
Because for Ethernet interfaces, they're using the Linux packet forwarding, whereas for VLAN interfaces, they didn't want to, implement the Linux bridge and all the. So they didn't want to take the Cumulus approach where they are trying to offload as much to Linux as possible.
Mm-hmm.
They decided to implement all the packet forwarding for non-IP, non-Ethernet stuff on their own. So if you create a VLAN interface that is tied to a single Ethernet interface, you get the MPLS working because the VLAN interface is implemented in their code and not in the Linux kernel.
Oh, wow.
And guess what I'm thinking about doing with netlab?
I don't know. Tell us.
Well, whenever you have an Ethernet interface and you have MPLS on it, why don't we fake a VLAN interface and we solve the problem?
Nice. I have to say, Ivan, I think you're just joking about being retired, right? All these work you're doing is just really involved and takes a lot of your time, and you're now making it for free for the community.
Well, I retired in the sense of I don't have any commercial activities anymore.
Yeah.
So you can't buy my stuff. And because you can't buy my stuff, I'm not obliged to create stuff.
Yeah.
All the pressure to deliver is gone. And now I'm slowly, getting recharged. And yes, this year on the seaside, I was bored again. That's good.
You did mention that in your post last year is there's a caveat, right?
Yeah.
If you get bored again, you reserve the right to come back.
So no, I decided that I don't want to come back ever again.
Okay.
Well,
okay.
Never say never, but who knows?
Sure.
So right now, all the payment infrastructure is shut down. The accountant does not expect any major commercial events to happen.
The accountants retire from your account too.
Well, we agreed on slightly lower fee because there are no transactions.
Right. Paid by performance.
Exactly. So I don't think that I want to go back into those waters in any foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But as my wife is always telling me, you cannot retire because you will be insufferable.
For her. She's
Yes.
like, no, for my sake, you cannot leave the network
Exactly.
engineering audience. Okay.
Don't you dare.
Yeah, exactly. For
Yeah,
her
so-
sake, we should all support Ivan and his wife for their sanity. So where can people find you and follow you on maybe social, on your own website? Where can people find your work and follow
Well,
you?
it's still ipspace.net.
Yep.
The first page has reshuffled a little bit because it's no longer focused so much on the webinars, because that wouldn't be fair, advertising stuff that people can't buy afterwards.
you,
So
you get the
it's more,
teaser, but you never have the
yeah.
goods for them to purchase.
So it's more focused on the free stuff that's available.
Yep.
And that's the blog posts. A lot of them are now focused, obviously, on the labs I'm doing and the new netlab features.
Yep.
netlab has its own website. The BGP labs have their own website. So there are the cloud labs. There are some data center challenges. There are some automation challenges. All that is on GitHub. A lot of that is available through GitHub pages. But I think ipspace.net is still, the umbrella.
Yeah.
And then you start exploring and you'll eventually find more or less everything.
Yeah, I would encourage people to bookmark it, because throughout our conversation, I've been furiously taking notes on what link to include and what we talked about. If I miss a few things, my apology. Go to ipspace.net and you should be able to find it. And I know you said you reshuffle, but for what I can see, it's still orange and white.
I removed the links, for example, to courses and subscription, because that makes no sense. I deprioritized the webinar links. I expanded the free content links. I added the links to various labs, minor things like that.
Yeah, I
On
see what you're saying.
the social networking side, I'm only on LinkedIn.
Okay. Any Twitter account that's fake?
No, I'm still on the crap formerly known as Twitter.
Okay.
It's just that probably a year ago or so, a certain car manufacturer, in his infinite wisdom, decided to start charging exorbitant fees for the API calls.
Yes.
And so the pipeline that I was using that would take the blog posts from the RSS feed and automatically post them on Twitter stopped working. And then I was like, oh, okay, should I cross post manually or should I stop caring? And whenever you have a dilemma like that, Google Analytics is your friend.
Yeah.
And I figured out that maybe 1% of the traffic is coming from Twitter.
Right.
So I was like, oh, that guy should stick to cars and I will stick to other social media platforms.
His cars and a bunch of other ventures that he...
Yeah, well, rockets are supposedly good. So yeah,
exactly. Neuralinks,
stick to vehicles.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm only on LinkedIn.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think also that speaks to owning your own platform. And, then you could get these indicators and making decisions a little bit easier and getting data, really. Ivan, it's just been such a pleasure to have you on. I don't think we've spoke before, but I'm so glad we get the chance to do this. And it's really an honor to have this talk with you. And one thing I would say is, I know you're not doing any commercial stuff, but these still cost money, even 57 cents, right? So if you have any chance for people to support you, maybe just not commercially, please let us know, because I know a bunch of people like me, would still want to provide, kind of appreciation for you as well.
Well, just send me karma points. That's good enough.
The digital cookie we talked about, right? Like like a digital cookie. And a thumbs up, subscribe to your GitHub BGP Lab repository start.
Well, speaking about all that stuff, so it would be really appreciated if people would actually report problems.
Okay.
Sometimes things are broken for months and someone says, well, this is broken. Like, why didn't anyone report that before?
Last changed 3 years ago. It's like, oh,
yeah.
well.
So if you find that something is broken, we need to know about that. If you don't report problems, we can't fix them. Yeah, the problem of eating your own dog food is that you know how to prepare it.
You could know how it tastes.
Yeah, and people are using the tools in all sorts of crazy and creative ways, and sometimes tools fail.
Yep.
And, if the tool says, well, sorry, Dave, I can't do that, and locks you out, that's okay because you got an error message. But if a tool crashes in some horrible way or does something that you didn't expect, then you need to report that.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of, again, for Git and non-immutable change history that, you report it and you'll get the credit for it and people will know, hey, Dave, you actually discovered this bug and Ivan was able to fix it.
Yeah. And, you don't have to fix it. We would appreciate pull requests.
Yeah. Yourself.
Specifically with netlab, it would be great if some vendor other than Nokia would actually care.
Thank you, Nokia.
Yeah, well, there is this guy at Nokia that takes care of implementing everything we do for SR Linux and SROS. He's doing a great job.
Yeah.
Then there is this guy currently, I think he's working for HP because HP acquired his company, whatever.
Okay.
It's complicated.
Sure. It's business.
He wasn't working for Juniper. He was working for some other company. He does everything for Aruba, Dell, Fios, Microtic. Oh, I forgot Microtic. We support Microtic 6 and 7.
Oh, nice.
So he's like, the guy that supports 4 or 5 different platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And apart from the Nokia guy, no one from the vendor side cares.
Okay. So we should all
Dear vendors, if
yeah.
you would love that people use your stuff with this project,
Yep.
Get your act together.
Nice. We'll put that out there. We will advocate for, more community contribution, usage report, and maybe even for more vendor involvement.
Well, now that you mentioned that would also be extremely valuable.
Yeah.
To hear from people how they use stuff.
Okay. Totally. I think that's the beauty of collaboration, open space. We could talk on, and I do have plans to talk about sustainability for vendor-backed open source project or whatnot. But anyway, that's another episode. I really appreciate your time, Ivan. I truly enjoy our conversation and just want to thank you again for being here, as well as all the contribution you do for the community.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Network Automation Nerds. Do you have any feedback for network automation, our guest Ivan today, or this episode? Send us some follow-ups at packetpushers.net/FU, where the FU stands for follow-up, of course. We want to hear from you. Check out our website at packetpushers.net to find other network engineering focused podcasts, blogs, YouTube videos, and so much more. You can find podcasts such as Network Break for weekly news, Heavy Networking for deep dives in networking technologies, Packet Protector for security, and so much more. Last but not least, remember that too much network automation will never be enough.